Welcome to the After Hours Clinic with Dr. David Gennarius and Better Life co-founder Andrew Lane, where we unpack the science of health and wellness, cut through the noise, and add a healthy dose of humor.
Dr. Dave, welcome back.
It's great to be back.
Here we are doing another book club. We're going to have to rename our podcast from the After Hours Clinic to the Doctor's Book Club, on random subjects podcast. But it's a lot of fun, and I really love the self-improvement of it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this the book we're reviewing today, I've actually been really, I have been bugging you to do this podcast, but because I've been so excited to talk about it, just because it's an interesting topic. This book is a pop culture book. So if you're coming to this podcast hoping for a Peter Attia experience minus the Epstein Association, this is not going to be your podcast, right? We are talking about this is cotton candy for the brain that happens to be in the medicine realm. And I love reading books like that. And I feel the same way. I was very entertained. I have 1,000 critiques. Why don't I let you kind of introduce the book?
I'm going to poke fun at it if I do that, but let me do my best to just present it. So I've got it on screen here. Surrounded by Narcissists, How to Effectively Recognize, Avoid, and Defend Yourself Against Toxic People and Not Lose Your Mind. Written by Mr. Surrounded by Everything, Thomas Erickson, best-selling author of Surrounded by Idiots. I called him Mr. Surrounded by Everything because his books, as I'm showing on screen,
had that title, yeah,
include Surrounded by Idiots, Surrounded by Psychopaths, Surrounded by Bad Bosses and Lazy Employees, Surrounded by Setbacks, Surrounded by Narcissists, Surrounded by Energy Vampires.
Oh my gosh.
Surrounded by Liars. We read the wrong book. We could have been reading about energy vampires.
I think sociopaths are the most interesting one to me. I read another book years ago called The Sociopath Next Door. And that's actually what kind of got me fascinated on this topic of personality disorders. And honestly, just as a physician, I think you read one called,
I think you actually read one because I read it at the same time with you, I believe. I believe we read one called The Psychopath Next Door.
No, look up The Sociopath Next Door, because it was a female author. It was like some PhD in.
Oh, Martha Stout. You're right. Okay.
Yeah,
but I do want to, okay. Of course you were right. This should come as no surprise. I it might say something about how much of a narcissist I am that I seek to correct you. And about 1 out of 10 times I'm right. And 9 out of 10 times I'm like, God damn it.
It's so funny that you say that. So I am, like I said, I'm sort of fascinated by personality disorders in general. And just so for the viewers, what is a personality disorder? A personality disorder is when you have personality traits that are extremely inflexible and pervasive in your personality that have a negative impact on your social functioning, on your relationships, on your overall well-being.
The key to the disorder diagnosis is this evidence of functional impact.
Well, yes, on some level there probably is dysfunction. I mean, in really high functioning, for example, a really high functioning narcissists become like presidents and senators. So on some level, they may be very high functioning, but you're right. On other levels, like with who knows what their relationship at home is like. Maybe Donald Trump and Melania have like this picture perfect wedding, though. The media loves to present photographs that suggest otherwise. Who knows the truth? And who knows if he's a narcissist? I'm not diagnosing, and I think that's a key take home. Is that we should not be diagnosing narcissists ourselves. But so personality disorder, again, these sort of fixed, inflexible personality traits that are maladaptive. And they come in like 3 flavors. We call them clusters, right? There's clusters A, B, and C. A are your eccentrics, right? They are the people that are just a little odd, generally not offensive, but maybe a bit hard to gauge and get close to. Cluster C, that is like your anxious, insecure, codependent types, right? And then cluster B, which this focuses on narcissistic personality, which falls in cluster B. These are the people that, for lack of a better word, they just rub you the wrong way, either on first blush or eventually on getting to know them. They can be described as dramatic, emotional, manipulative. And there's really like 4 diagnoses within cluster B, and narcissistic personality disorder is one of them. The other ones that fall into that cluster B are going to be like your antisocial. So think of like your Bernie Madoff or your, Ted Bundy's, like the people that are simply devoid of empathy and completely manipulative. You have your,
I love those guys. I love those guys.
Yeah, I like watching movies about them. Right.
Right.
There's a histrionic, which is like, think of somebody who dresses age inappropriate, flamboyant, is sexually suggestive, but tends to be kind of superficial. And then there's the borderlines, who all of us probably know. These are the ones that really, they walk into a room and you just cringe. Like, they're the people that, one day they're your best friend. The next day, everything you do is terrible. Right. And as doctors, we know these ones right away because they're the ones who come in and tell us like, oh, you're such a great doctor. My last doctor, he was so incompetent and stupid and blah, blah. And then 3 months later, you're the incompetent and stupid doctor to another doctor, right? And then the last one is the subject of today, which is narcissistic personality disorder. And this is sort of defined by people who have this sort of grandiose, elevated feeling of self-worth and entitlement, who are desperately in need of recognition because they have fragile egos, and tend to have limited empathy and a manipulative side. So in pop culture, everyone references Donald Trump because he's known to be kind of this person that likes to, emblazon his name on towers and, likes to get into Twitter wars with like D-list celebrities who call him out, right? Because he can't take anyone criticizing Donald Trump. Again, I don't know if he has narcissistic personality disorder. I'm just saying those are kind of narcissist traits. And interestingly, as the book kind of alludes to, a lot of people in power tend disproportionately have either narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic traits because they can be very superficially charming, which oftentimes allows them to work their way up in the corporate ladder, so to speak.
Let's bite on that for a second, because I think we're getting into a couple different topics. One is, the appeal of this kind of book to you and how it overlaps with your, entertainment and curiosity with personality disorders in general. But maybe at a high level, like, what's your best elevator pitch for what this book is about and what you can learn from this book?
Yeah. So this book is, starts by sort of defining what narcissistic personality disorder is and how to recognize the patterns. It then spends a great deal of time talking about how to, once you've identified these narcissists, how to deal with them, how to remove them from your life. I mean, he's very clear that if you have a narcissist in your life, you need to extricate if you can. And then the last part, which I find the most interesting part, he talks sort of about how our culture has produced a lot more narcissism just in general, not necessarily narcissistic personality disorder as a definable disorder, but narcissistic traits. And this, what we're doing right now is an example of that, right? My parents were doctors. They did not go on a podcast, create a podcast and say, hey, everyone, look and listen to me. But one, I guess I'm slightly narcissistic in doing this. And two, obviously on some level, this is promoting my practice, which has become sort of you're expected to do, right? You're expected to have a social media presence. You're expected to I guess, do things like this to make yourself stand out. And, his argument is that this kind of creates an environment where more narcissism breeds.
Yeah, that we've got a narcissistic culture, right? That the culture as a whole is now narcissistic in the way that it rewards, incentivizes, and creates the expectation for people to engage in narcissistic behavior. So yeah, I mean, great summary of the book. I have to be honest with you and say, like, there was a large part of it that I was like disinterested in, I guess, for a variety of reasons. I'm not sure if is now a good time for me to shit on the book, or
absolutely.
I mean, it's I will get to I really liked the last third of the book, like how it relates to our culture, how it intersects with parenting. Like, I found these to be incredibly useful topics of discussion, and I thought he had some good things to say, but for the most part, I'm just I'm constantly irritated by the duality of this. On one hand, this binary definition of, does someone have narcissistic personality disorder? Yes or no. Are they a narcissist? Yes or no. Versus, are they narcissistic? Somewhere on the spectrum of narcissism. And I find that I think he likes to have it both ways. Like, he doesn't seem to, while he acknowledges that there is this duality and there's ways of talking about people with a diagnosis, and there's ways of talking about how we're all a little narcissistic. He does these things that I find really annoying when he's like, well, a narcissist can't feel any empathy, or a narcissist can't care about you, or
they can't be treated.
They can't be treated. Like, all of a sudden a narcissist is a thing, instead of the vast majority of what I've from what I've read, it seems most people are somewhere on a spectrum exhibiting narcissistic traits. And perhaps certainly there are people who are so high on the spectrum of narcissism that they don't exhibit interest in other people or other people's feelings, or they don't seem to care about anybody. But it tends to talk about narcissists at times as if they're these mythical creatures, like narcissists. They're not like you and I. They're magical human beings who have no empathy.
Mix up others, yeah.
Yeah, they're super other, right? And it's really, it's really like daytime television-y.
Yes. So you touched on so many important points that I agree. So I want to lead with, I also don't have a very high opinion of the book while it is entertaining. And I'll,
okay.
Why
go buy the book, be entertained. Also, it's not that good.
I mean, so I literally bought this book when we were flying home from Utah. I was in the airport and I knew that I had a 5-hour flight. So I was like, I need a book. And I saw this on the shelves. The reason I gravitated toward this is this kind of phenomenon I've seen as a doctor, where in the last 5 years or so, I have seen this uptick in patients that have diagnosed people in their lives as being clinical narcissists, or tell me their therapist has diagnosed this other person in their life as clinical narcissist. Right. And it's funny because, and we know of one that we're not going to mention, that we had to actually remove from our practice, who engaged in this, would frequently say this about her partner, who we also treated. And, of course, I don't say anything when they tell me all this, but honestly, when someone said that, two things, it's one, I think it's very irresponsible to be making these diagnoses, especially for a psychologist who's never met, or a therapist who's never met your significant other, to make this diagnosis based on, one report. But also it often feels like they're projecting, right? Like, they themselves tend to be the ones who are more attention seeking and manipulative. As physicians, predominantly medical physicians such as myself, we don't make these diagnoses of personality disorders. We have strong suspicion when someone comes in with certain personality disorders. We all know who has borderline, right? But we're not the one who makes it. We don't like putting it on the chart because historically we've been told that these are people that can't be treated. So it creates bias in everyone who sees them. So you have to be very judicious in how you put this diagnosis. But interestingly, I've seen tons of people get the borderline personality disorder diagnosis. I've seen plenty get antisocial. I've even seen a couple of histrionic. I've never actually seen narcissistic personality disorder be on the chart. Like I've never actually seen a patient that was truly diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And I don't know exactly why that is. It may be to what you're saying, that it's a spectrum and hard to really, narrow it down to a true pathology. And it may be the fact that amongst people with like cluster B kind of personality disorders, they do tend to be on the more charming end of the spectrum. And, if you're a doctor in a corporate practice, the reality is on average, you spend about 19 minutes talking to a patient on a given year if you're a primary doctor, which means those 19 minutes, if they're charming, you may not see it. But yeah, I was really fascinated by this uptick in kind of amateur diagnoses of personality disorders.
Yeah, there's also this phrase in the subtitle of the book, how to effectively recognize, avoid, and defend yourself against toxic people. And that's a phrase that's also gotten a huge uptick in use, and I think is clearly is sometimes used interchangeably with people who somebody believes is a narcissist. But yeah, I just found, I'm constantly a broken record in saying that people are many things. So when I hear the author say that a narcissist can't do this or must do this or is this way, I'm like, okay, like maybe, probably, like, but you kind of sound like you're talking about vampires here.
It's a witch hunt, right?
Exactly. It's a witch hunt, right? It's also a caricature. We're boiling it down to like, people are this caricature, and some people surely are, but I guess part of my reaction to the first half to 2/3 of the book was like I'm not in an abusive relationship. I just don't know. This isn't very useful information for me to like tell me that there are these boogeymen out there. Like I believe you. I believe that there are some boogeymen out there, and I believe there's a lot of people who are like boogeyman-ish, boogeyman adjacent. I'd like to think that as a well-adjusted human, I'm just kind of steering clear of most of these people. When I bump into a bad person, and I do, right? Like we bump into bad people. When I bump into a bad person, like I don't spend a lot of time figuring out like, is this person a diagnosable case of narcissistic personality disorder, or are they just a little narcissistic? I'm like, I don't like that person. I don't think I'm going to like try to do much around that person. And if I have to work with that person, I'm trying to give them a wide berth. I'm trying to just get in and out and get away from it.
Well, so that is the dysfunction of personality disorder. Exactly what you said is eventually, even, in the case of narcissistic personality disorder, where they may be, initially very charming, eventually they will do something that rubs you the wrong way and you avoid them. That's what creates the social isolation they experience. And ultimately, most of them don't come in because they think they're narcissists. They're coming because they're depressed. My major issue with this is, one, he's teaching people, basically to self-diagnose, or not self-diagnose, but to, kind of use pop culture diagnosis of narcissism.
He's creating more armchair psychologists. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't even recall if he even presented the DSM criteria in his book.
I never saw it. No.
So he doesn't even give us the information yet. He's telling people to identify and extricate themselves. And one of the things he said that I found most disturbing was, when you're dealing with a narcissist, don't consider how they treated you 2 years ago or even 2 weeks ago. Consider how they're treating you now. And whoa, slow down. We all have bad days. We all do things that are a little bit narcissistic, like start a podcast. you know, like, but I find it really dangerous to tell people that, because what he's saying is these people cannot be treated, they cannot be cured, extricate your
Yeah.
life. Now, here's the interesting part when you look at, because this book is very light on facts and science. The reality is, in the studies they've done, like looking longitudinally at people with narcissistic personality disorder, and these are small studies, granted, but what they find is over time, about half of them, or a little bit more than half of them, go in remission of their diagnosis, right? So this notion that they can't be treated and that there's no hope for them, that's kind of antithetical to what we know, and I think incredibly irresponsible to say. Now, of course, there are times when you do actually need to extricate yourself. But yes, that should not be based on like you had a bad week with your spouse, right? It should really be based on a pattern of, is this person lacking in empathy? Are they manipulative? Are they controlling? If the answer to those is yes, then thinking of a separation is, in your best interest. But if there are just traits, I think this is something that can be worked on, discussion can help. So that was probably my major issue with the book.
I think you could take the book and possibly, at least the first 2/3 of it, you could probably take it and retitle it, and you could say, does your life suck? Here's how to blame others around you. Here's why it's other people's fault.
That's so funny. I don't know that I read that much into it, but yes, I mean, I think when I talk about these patients that claim everyone's a narcissist, that is what they're doing. They're essentially blaming others. Like I remember I had this one patient whose marriage is failing, and she described this person as a toxic narcissist. And, she would call me regularly with like tales of like absolute woe where, her best friend decided she wanted nothing to do with her. Her sister decided she wanted nothing to do with her. I remember it being very difficult to kind of gently tell her like, hey, there's a pattern. And at the center of that pattern happens to be you, know?
Oh, man.
Because what it did was it absolved her from any like introspection. It's these people are wrong. There's something wrong with these people if they don't love me. I think we're kind of saying the same thing. That is, I think, the inherent danger of a book like this, especially one that's so light on facts, not even giving the true definition of narcissistic personality disorder, not talking about the clinical course of narcissistic personality disorder, just simply telling us they exist. This is what they're like. Donald Trump is one. Look out for them and remove them from your life.
Yeah, right. Of course, it's a British guy. I'm pretty sure he is British.
No, he's Swedish. He's Swedish.
Oh, Swedish. I apologize. That's right. He did say Swedish. It's a European. Of course, it's a Swedish guy telling us our president is who just has to dump on Trump a little bit. I would love to troll the author and say, tell me about the difference between toxic narcissists and non-toxic narcissists. How can I know, if my wife, spouse, best friend, teacher, boss is a non-toxic narcissist? Because it's just I just find some of these labels so preposterous.
Those are the lowlights. I think the highlight was his like kind of analysis of how our culture is becoming more narcissistic. And he has a chapter that I just chef's kiss, just love to death. So he actually talks about the rise in narcissism through a lens point of how our motor vehicles have changed. So he brings up the idea that, for example, when the SUV started coming out, the idea was to be the biggest car on the road. It's the safest. Then everyone started, getting their, bigger and bigger. huge swinging dick of like an SUV to the point where it's ludicrous. And like, or trucks are one that just drive me insane. Like whenever I see someone in a Ford F-150 or a Ram truck, Ford F-150 or above, or a Ram truck, I immediately make, judgments on them. Why? Because I like to cycle and I live in an area with a lot of like, one lane roads where there's no sidewalk. And these are always the people that blow by me, giving me like a foot of space, just terrifying me. And, I say that joking. I'm not saying they're all narcissists, but I do find it, I do see something. I agree with them in the sense that like, how preposterous is it when you see like someone who clearly like can barely drive a sedan driving like, the Jeep Canyonera or whatever. That's like, 19 seats in it. And like, they're like a hazard to the road because it's hard to drive and manipulate this thing. There's blind spots. So I did find that take on like how cars have evolved are kind of emblematic as how we've become more narcissistic as a culture. I'm a truck driver. I drive a Toyota Tacoma, a very modestly sized truck.
Oh, your truck is one of the good ones. Your truck is one of the good ones.
Virtuous ones. Yes, it's one of the non-narcissistic.
Okay.
And unlike every Ford F-150 and above, you can tell we use it to do work. Like when you look in the back of our bed, it's
Tacoma,
full of gravel and sand. And when you look in the back of a Ford F-350, immaculate every single time.
Yeah, so we'll have another episode coming soon, the virtues of car ownership and which models say what about you. So tune in for that.
I think your minivan is like the most virtuous, by the way.
Thank you. I'm so bummed to have had to get rid of it. I bought a Model Y. I bought a Tesla Model Y. I joined the herd and
the
got one of these.
Herd.
The narcissistic herd of red Tesla owners. And my wife would not let me keep a third car at our house. She was just, she's got too much pride to see our house become a parking lot. So
yeah, see, to me, the minivan screams, I'm not a big deal. I don't take myself too seriously. I'm certainly not trying to look cool. I love my children. To me, a Tesla says, I don't really care about cars or know anything about cars, but I want people to know that I'm rich. I make fun of my wife's Tesla all the time because I just think it's the most, like hers is an older model and it's the one that doesn't have like, you have to like use a computer to turn on the windshield wipers. Like it's such an impractical car that I just mock it.
She has the Model 3, I think. Yeah. It's it's like a small, like the Mazda Miata of Teslas. Yeah.
Yeah.
On the subject of cars, I mean, there's pages and pages and pictures of how cars have become meaner looking and more aggressive. And this is a sign of our narcissistic personality culture, our culture of narcissism.
Yeah. That may have been a bit of a stretch, but it was entertaining.
Yeah, I do think it was a little bit of a stretch. With that said, the things I thought were not a stretch was the cult of self-esteem that, came about kind of as we were children, I think. There became this cult of self-esteem and it makes sense that there would be a link between worshiping self-esteem and promoting self-esteem at every opportunity, that all of a sudden that would produce more self-centered behavior and behavior that was at times potentially even like antisocial or narcissistic.
When you bring up that point of self-esteem, I think he does bring up an interesting point, which is traditionally we're all taught to think that narcissists behave this way because of low self-esteem. But in reality, what he brings up in this book is when they actually test levels of self-esteem, they tend to be on the high end. So they don't lack in self-esteem, they just lack in empathy. And it's actually people with lower self-esteem that, oftentimes tend to be more adjusted and more successful in many ways because they don't overestimate their own abilities, right? What you're saying, about this sort of cult of self-esteem, participation trophies, everyone's beautiful, body positivity. I think one of the arguments is that this sort of, elevating self-esteem to be this ideal to which we must attain is actually harming us by making us more narcissistic. Would you agree that that's kind of what you got?
That definitely seems to be his take, right? And it's not clear that he thinks that we should abandon the entire enterprise of helping proactively ensuring children are encouraged to have healthy self-esteem. But he does definitely seem to suggest that it should be a little more nuanced than the average take has been historically. Like the average take has been pro self-esteem, and I guess that I used the word healthy self-esteem. I think even I've been reprogrammed to recognize that it's not infinite self-esteem we want, it's healthy self-esteem. And but for the longest time, there's been a movement. I think this is, kids who were raised in the 80s and the 90s, and I consider myself one of them, who were just surrounded by this constant adulation and worship of good job, you're the best, you can be anything.
Do you feel you got that in your childhood? Do you feel that was part of your childhood?
Definitely.
Really?
And I know there's huge differences between you and I in that. I mean, you've talked endlessly about kind of the hardworking immigrants that your parents were, and how they did not try to, they absolutely were not trying to instill this sorts of, they were not trying to fill your head with nonsense.
Let's not put that in past tense. They're still not trying to do that
They're
shit.
still not trying to fill your head with nonsense.
I saw them this weekend. They were not trying to inflate my self-esteem.
That's good, right? And I think when you look at some of the socioeconomic trends, like who is successful in America, it turns out immigrants and the children of immigrants are statistically among the most successful. And if economic success is important to you, it may be better off to instill hard work and discipline, and a little bit less of this fanciful self-worth, self-esteem
building kind of parenting. Yeah. I it's funny that you bring up my parents, because they may very well have been an anomaly to the rest of the kids who are my age, right? In the sense that they, as you brought up, were these immigrant parents. And I recall being a young adult actually being kind of mad at them, because they were people that were no nonsense, that had a lot of expectations, that were critical. And I remember thinking, I have low self-esteem because of the way they, kind of were, down on me a lot. But it's funny that you bring that up. I think a lot about my mom, not that she purposely tore down my self-esteem, but one of the interesting things about my mom was whenever I had a conflict, whether it was a child or as an adult, her thing was never, oh, you poor baby. It was always, what do you think you may have done to contribute? So I'll give you an example from adulthood. This is get your little violins out for this one. Interestingly, before I married Dr. Uffriginaris, I was actually engaged to another woman from my med school class who I had couples matched with. And what the match is, it's how you get into residency. Deserves this whole show. But basically, we had planned to move out to California. We matched in the same city. And right after we matched, she gave me back my engagement ring and she said, I don't want to get married. And, tears, violin, and you talk to your mom, and when you tell her what happened, you're really hoping to hear that monster, how dare they do this to my baby? But she really wasn't like that. I mean, she did console me, but she was kind of she really did say, what do you think your role in this was? She made me think about it. which hurts, right? No one wants to hear that when it's happening. But like, as a result, I did look at like some of the things and some of my behavior and realize how like immature I could be and how, like thoughtless I was sometimes, like I don't look back on this person who dumped me as like, oh, they're a monster. I look back on it and say, wow, I was really immature. I don't blame her.
And part of that is because of the outlook that your mother helped instill in you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if based on that, if you had given me a test in my 20s on self-esteem, it would have been pretty low, I would guess. But I do think it made me like view the world in a more realistic manner. Yeah. And I think maybe some of that feeling of inadequacy drives us to be successful, though I don't know that that's the healthiest way. I've actually really wondered because I had a friend, like one of my close friends from the neighborhood, whose mother just talked about him like he was the sun and the moon and how intelligent. And, if he got a B in one of his classes, it's because it was the teacher's fault because she wasn't engaging him or she was biased against him for X, Y, and Z.
What a cheerleader. Yeah. What a cheerleader for her son. That's great.
Well, and he's more like financially, he is more successful than me. Relationship wise, I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer of like how much self-esteem we should be building, how much like, hard reality we should be given to kids. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
You want that typical like healthy self-esteem. You want someone to understand that they have value and they are good at the things they're good at. Dave, you're fun to be around. You're nice. You think of others. You're a great person to talk to if I'm feeling low, right? These are ways in which I want you to feel good about yourself, right? Dave, you're an incredible doctor and an incredible thinker, and you're constantly studying. And I can always rely on you to understand and get to the bottom of a complex medical subject.
Can you say what you just said, but with my parents' accent? No, I'm just kidding. I was kidding. Sorry.
I'm going to get an AI. That'd be terrific. I'd love to.
Just have my mom and dad say this to me.
David, you're a... I don't want to get canceled like it's 2020. But then you don't want to be telling your kids that like every idea you've ever had is the best idea ever. You are always the one with the best ideas. Like, no, like other people have great ideas. Not everything you think of is the best. And you want that nuanced, balanced approach. And I think modern parenting, at least the Dr. Becky and the various parenting resources I avail myself of in books and podcasts, largely the trend seems to be coming around to like having this mixed approach, right? Don't beat down your kids, but also don't elevate them and tell them they're princesses and kings. And in fact, I almost barfed when I went to a princess themed birthday party about 6 months ago, because I just thought like, what the hell? Like this is probably an unhealthy obsession. Do not raise your daughters to want to be princesses.
Do not raise your daughters like Nicolene Duclef raises her daughter. No, I'm kidding.
Just don't raise your kids to expect to be the smartest one in the room. Don't raise your kids to expect their ideas to be better than everybody else's ideas. Hopefully that answers, that kind of speaks to your question. And I think the author of Surrounded by Narcissists would agree that like that kind of middling approach, the fair and balanced, let's bring in a Fox News trope here. A fair and balanced approach is better, right? Like we don't need to be monks and say everything's terrible. We also don't need to be nihilists and say nothing matters. But we definitely shouldn't be so self-aggrandizing that everything is
to be celebrated.
This child is God's gift to mankind. Like that helps nobody.
Because I'm a narcissist, I'm going to touch on a point but I'm going to do a non-narcissistic thing and ask you a follow-up question.
Okay. That you don't really care about the answer to, but you just want to hear. You want to blend in a little bit.
Know that I'm not a narcissist.
Yeah.
I think so. I think this spectrum of parent you're talking about, I believe it was talked about in that book we read, The Coddling of the American Mind, where it puts like this like, I don't know, 4 areas of parenting. There's like, there's negligent, permissive, authoritative, and authoritarian. And like on the y-axis is warmth, and on the x-axis is like strictness or lack of permissiveness. And basically their argument is you want to be in the quadrant of authoritative, meaning you have strict standards and expectations, but you're also warm, right? So that's actually how I'd probably describe my mom, is she's like, expect things out of me, but very warm, whereas my dad was more of a authoritarian, like, do this because I said so.
4 parenting styles, exactly as you were saying: permissive, neglectful, authoritarian, authoritative. And this graphic labels the axes as responsiveness and demandingness. And so the least responsive and least demanding would be a neglectful. The most responsive and most demanding would be authoritative. Most demanding but least responsive is authoritarian.
Yeah. So authoritarian is, think of your 1950s dad. He barely knows anything about his kids. He's there to work and drink, whiskey with the boys at lunchtime, because that was cool then. And when he comes home, he smokes a cigarette, gets a hot meal. The wife takes care of the kids, right? Permissive is what you are talking about.
Yeah, it's what we desperately want to see less of in the world, right? We desperately want to see less of this worshiping the child parenting strategy, where you demand nothing, demand very little of the kid, and you're just overly indulgent and overly responsive. And there have been a couple kids in my kids' preschool along the way that, you could just tell these were kids being raised by parents who were just highly permissive. It's like you'd have kids that were statistically the worst behaved in the class, and the parent would just like want to talk about the kid's feelings, like, and there would be very little consequences. And it was dreadful. It was I've been really fortunate to see that like some of these kids are growing out of it despite what they're parenting, whatever. I don't know if the parents are changing. They might be. We should give them credit if they are, but some of them are getting cues from some of them are getting parenting from teachers and other adults in their lives, and are slowly growing out of this like overindulged stage of their life, thankfully.
It's funny. It reminds me of a story of like, we talk about like this rise in permissive parenting. Like every teacher will tell you, like if you ever talk to a teacher, how, these days, like parents advocate for their kids in ways that are just crazy. And I remember I got a little taste of it but the year before I went to med school, I had a year like just to do whatever. So I was just working random jobs. And one of my jobs was teacher assistant, where, I graded papers, I, subbed classes, and I taught like a little anatomy class as well. But like, I recalled that I had to sub this algebra class once, and there was a girl who was just disrespectful, didn't know what was going on, distracting, gave her chances, eventually gave her detention, didn't think of anything of it because it wasn't like that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. A few weeks later, I get called into the principal's office, and her father, who's like an attorney, basically starts fucking deposing me and picking out the fact that I have no experience as a teacher and saying, well, don't you think it? I think the problem is you don't have any experience as an educator. What he didn't realize about me is, while he was right, I didn't give a fuck because I knew I was going to med school the next year. So basically what I said is, I'll cop to everything you said. Maybe I'm not a great teacher, but your daughter can't graph a line, and that's on you, and, mic drop, like moment. I didn't get fired because they needed someone to grade papers. But I know that like most teachers can't do that because they're not like moving on next year. But yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen this, and whether it's coming back to a place of normalcy, I not necessarily seen evidence that we're becoming more moderate in that. But the question I wanted to ask you this, Andrew, because I find this fascinating about you. One of the things that I love about you is you have some of the most genuine confidence I've ever seen in a person. Like you, for those who don't know Andrew Lane will approach anyone in a room, say anything, and always finds a way to like kind of be charming. And or when Andrew does something, he doesn't do it small. He goes big because he like believes it. You have a true belief in yourself that far exceeds mine. And I think far exceeds most people, but in knowing you all these years, no part of it seems false. So, I know it's hard to accept a compliment like that, but just take it. And where do you think that comes from? Do you think, and as you think about how you were parented, where do you think that may have been contributing in any way?
Yeah. My mother was very complimentary as I was raised. I could have ended up being a real asshole narcissist, and some people certainly will. Hopefully they'll like, comment, and subscribe, and let everyone know that in fact I am a real asshole narcissist. But my mother was very much in this camp of like, good job, participation trophies all the way, Team Andrew, and you can be anything you want to be. And that was a very positive, empowering kind of force in my life, and one that could have definitely inflated my ego. It did inflate my ego a lot. It could have overinflated my ego. But then we were raised evangelical Christian, and I think the church really instilled the importance of doing things for others and channeling abilities for a greater purpose. And there's a lot in the Bible about how like the greatest accomplishments of man are like, they're nothing compared to how great God is. Like, so I think there's a lot of like humbling messaging that comes from this kind of non-sectarian evangelical upbringing that balanced that out. And so I think I came away with a message. And this is also then, was raised in a time when pop psychology, as maybe this book is an example of, was on the rise. And it was very obvious. Like I was just hearing constantly about pop psychology of other people and how people underestimate themselves too much. People don't, I was realizing that the whole world is full of people who think too little of themselves. So I felt like there was an element of like calculation here of like, it's okay to like be a little confident because most people aren't confident enough. And so I think these three forces together led to this permission slip I gave myself to just go out and be ballsy at things, as long as it wasn't, evil, it wasn't harming other people. I had the impression that there needed to be pro-social elements to it.
Let me summarize for you. Basically, what you're telling me is the positivity of your mom's maybe somewhat more permissive attitude toward parenting and pop psychology gave you confidence, but it's actually, despite being an atheist, Jesus Christ who saved you from being a narcissist. Is that accurate?
I think Jesus saved me from being a narcissist. That's true. Jesus saved me. So yeah, I think that's probably accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've had a breakthrough on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. I've done my work as a Catholic.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I'm that'll be another good podcast we'll have at some point, the utility of religion.
I love it.
For our culture and for our kids. And I constantly say, I wish that we would convert to Judaism and be atheist Jews, because we could have, some structure of religion in our life without having the pressure of believing in make-believe things. Yeah. Religion has been very helpful for me, despite the fact that I'm a non-believer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't comment on the make-believe thing. I think there's like a good percentage of our audience who just turned the podcast off if they were listening.
Yeah, I
But
just drove a bunch of people
come
away.
back.
Our three
Yeah,
listeners, come back. Come
yeah,
back, our three
mommy,
listeners.
come back.
Yeah.
No.
Dave's a
Um,
good Catholic. Dr. Dave is a good Catholic.
it's funny you bring up that topic, and I think the word that I would use is institutions. And I think a great book on the topic is one that you actually had us read for book club back in California, which is I believe it's Yuval Levine was the author. It's called The Time to Build, and he's a conservative author who talks about the importance of institutions and how in modern culture, there's a lot of talk about tearing down institutions and that we should instead be focusing on strengthening our institutions and building new ones. And I'll be honest, that book did inspire me to create this practice. So I think that's absolutely, I know it has nothing to do with narcissism, what we're talking about, but I think it'd be a great book to talk about.
A Time to Build is a good one. I'm going to put it up on the screen just as a plug. So A Time to Build, From Family and Community to Congress and the Campus, How Recommitting to Our Institutions Can Revive the American Dream. I read a book before this called That Used to Be Us. And it was by Thomas Friedman. And it's a bit, I'll admit that if one is conservative, you might barf at everything Thomas Friedman has to say. He's a pretty liberal economist, if we can call him that. But he definitely makes a case that it's our institutions and that our culture used to spend a lot more time in institutions, in Lions clubs, in Rotary clubs, in churches. It's not the only point in his book, but it is an important one.
Do you feel like these kind of institutions, where we are part of something that's bigger than us, right? That's the idea of an institution, whether it's a church, whether it is the Rotary Club. Do you feel that those are somewhat of an antidote to narcissistic culture?
Yeah, and I think he brings that up at the end, right? Like, I feel like in his Being the Change, right? He recommends digital detox, by the way, which I am a fan of recently. But I feel like he made a point of saying, like, find deeper meaning, like look outside of yourself, right? And I think that that's one of the things that these institutions, whichever institution they may be, it could be the local Boys and Girls Club, it could be the local Boy Scout group that you volunteer for. It could be community service day with your Parks and Rec department, building better parks. But finding deeper meaning, I think finding things that are bigger than yourself to dedicate time and energy towards help, not only are good for your soul, but are also anti-narcissistic, right? They're the antithesis of being narcissistic.
And I think there's also, I remember reading a book, I can't remember the name of it, it's eluding me now, but it's talking about how that kind of, the idea of joining institutions and helping others is sort of an antidote to depression as well. Meaning people who are most involved in institutions that, particularly those that, are in service to others, tend to be happier in general. And I think you've expressed your belief in that as well.
That's a huge message, right? And I think it may have been in the book on depression meds, mentions something about that. I always get these names mixed. Was it Yuval Noah Harari or it's Yuval?
He wrote Sapiens, Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah, it's the other guy who's I always get confused with. What's the book? What's the book on antidepressants? Antidepressants don't work. What is it called?
So many out there.
It's Johann Hari is the author.
Yes.
But what's the name of his book?
It's called Lost Connections.
Lost Connections, right. So his book, Lost Connections, Johann Hari, it's not the entire point of his book, but institutions are absolutely mentioned in there, right? Like getting out there, developing connections, being a part of something bigger than yourself. There was also My Year of Living Danishly, which we read together. My Year of Living Danishly,
which just made me happy. Yeah.
Yeah, which I'll point out again, like it's not a book about institutions, but in her Year of Living Danishly, besides building a lot of Lego and learning how to say Hooger, she realizes that you're expected as a Dane, even as a transplant to Denmark, you're expected to join all of these institutions and clubs and be a part of things and fall in line and do things bigger than yourself and serve causes, wider than yourself. And that is something I think that the rugged individualism of the American dream, of the American spirit is at times very empowering. But at times is a little soulless. It leaves one lacking in meaning at times.
I 100% agree. And I'm a hypocrite as I, I'm in my 4,000 square foot house on an acre and a half of land. But, I had in a very hypocritical manner, I talked on previous podcasts that actually the neighborhood I liked living in most was this middle-class neighborhood in San Clemente because, although there was no personal space, our neighbors were cool. We knew each other. We supported each other. And you're right. The American ideal is very much no, that's for losers. Winners own 30 acres, and
they build big fences. They've got huge garages full of cars. Yeah.
And I always say listen, I grew up in America. I'm an American. I think it's the greatest country. I think there's so many great things about America. But if I were an observer from an alien planet and had to choose where I lived, it'd be Finland, right? Because I would just go to the happiest place on earth where there's strong institutions, fewer narcissists, and everyone's supported and happy.
After reading My Year of Living Danishly, if I had to just roll the dice or if I had to just send my kids anywhere to be and I then had no control over it afterwards, it made a pretty compelling case that was a society that forced you to assimilate, forced you to be a part of something, and then forced you to join in a way that would, promote thinking of others and being a part of something bigger than yourself. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put in a plug for this book. So I am not a huge lover of pop fiction, medicine, or psychology. As a writer, I don't necessarily love his writing. I think he's too flamboyant and over the top sometimes. But because I've read others of his works. But this book, I actually recommend to patients all the time. And I actually think this would be a great book to do a podcast on.
Yeah.
What this book is about is essentially that the root of depression for many people is not necessarily a chemical imbalance that, you just got bad genes and your chemicals don't work. It's the fact that we've lost connection to a lot of important things. We've lost connections to our neighborhoods, right? Neighbors are no longer expected to know each other and raise each other's kids. We've lost connection to our work because private equity has bought up all the small businesses. Now it's a faceless, soulless corporation where you have no vested interest in the company. We've lost our connection to nature. He just talks about the things that we are missing in life that kind of lead to some of our, psychological and social woes and, sort of practical things we could do to be getting at some of it back. And I find this particularly helpful because, as I've mentioned before, although I'm not anti-psych meds in any way, the truth is for most people with depression, treating them with an antidepressant is like a coin flip. Meaning a lot of people don't respond to meds. They have side effects, whatever. I do think this is a good framework for how to maybe look at your life and improve it. And I think it'd be very helpful for patients. So we don't necessarily have to do it next. If you want to do a different book, we can definitely do that. But at some point I would like to get back to this one because I do like it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We should probably wrap for this episode though. Is any parting thoughts you want to say about surrounded by narcissists? Are we surrounded by narcissists?
I think we are in danger of becoming more narcissistic, and we should be aware of it because I do agree with him that our culture is leading us to a more narcissistic place.
The rise of narcissism around us is real.
Practically, for many people, that could be doing a digital detox to kind of get off these social media apps and, chase that, approval. But I think my big take home from this is, please do not diagnose people with narcissistic personality disorder. And please do not leave your husband because you've had a bad week. I do think you should be very careful in making that. And also remember, this is not a terminal condition. 50% recover spontaneously. So it's not as dire as the author makes it out to be. But yes, I do think we should be more wary of the narcissistic trends in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to underline part of what you're saying, which you might agree that, like, if you're struggling with a relationship in your life and you suspect the person may be a narcissist, or you've decided to armchair diagnose them as a narcissist, I think calling them a narcissist, labeling it, is unlikely to be helpful. And so, like, with so much of just like the most basic therapy work is like, maybe don't call each other names and instead like focus on behaviors and specific behaviors that you're concerned about that you want to see changed.
I think this is exactly what you're saying. Name calling in any way and kind of extreme reactions always put people on the defensive. And he even brings this up in the book and his strategies in dealing with narcissists. Focus on specific behaviors. Yeah, I love that.
I feel like that's a message like our greater society should have, because right now it turns out I thought we were done canceling people, but we just canceled Cesar Chavez.
What do you do?
Accused of sexually abusing girls who worked in the movement. He's accused of grooming and sexually abusing girls who worked in the labor movement with him.
That seems like something you should be canceled for, but like, if it's true.
He understood.
Like, he didn't make a racist Twitter post.
I grew up in San Diego. This is like, Cesar Chavez was a god. I went to elementary school right off of Cesar Chavez Parkway. And we put his name, the state of California made a state holiday to celebrate him. And really, in hindsight, we probably should have celebrated his work and less about celebrating him, because your heroes will always disappoint you. Like 50 years later, we're finding out, oh my God, he did some bad things. It's like, okay, he did some bad things. Like, what should we do about that? And the answer, apparently, right now is we should take his name off of every elementary school that it's on. We should take his name off of every sign that it's on. We should take his name off the state holiday that bears his name. We should erase the promotion of the history of him and his movement, and somehow fill it in with something else.
He was a socialist, correct? That was his thing.
He was a farm labor organizer. He thought farm workers deserve dignity and a living wage and should organize, right? He's like a union guy for farm workers. But it should have been like we should have found a way by now to celebrate the good things people do without then having to cancel that celebration when we find out that they also did something bad. I was trying to say closing remarks about surrounded by narcissists. Don't cancel your husband.
Yeah, don't cancel your husband.
We don't have to cancel
everybody. Don't cancel
everybody.
your wife.
Yeah. It may not be helpful to have labels and definitive labels for everything and then talk about these people as if they're the boogeyman. People do bad things. People do good things. When people do bad things, you should call them out on their shit and have a conversation. And if they keep doing bad things, you should deprioritize them in your life. Move away from them. Get away from them. So, and
I also think whenever you're hurling labels and invectives, maybe look inwardly and see, like, maybe you share some of this.
If you've diagnosed more than 5 narcissists in the last month, go to a mental hospital for yourself right away.
And then the last thing I'd say is that, like, if you're wondering, like, is social media making me narcissistic, or is this post-narcissistic? If you want a reference, just remember when COVID happened and like that actress started singing Imagine, and like Do you remember this like famous, I think it was Gal Gadot or something. She got a bunch of celebrities to sing Imagine by John Lennon, talking about how they're in solidarity with the struggle of us commoners while they're like in their mansions, like, and it was just the most tone deaf. Or the other one that I think of is there was like this DJ, which like, don't get me started in DJs. But like, he like did a George Floyd remix. He was like this white DJ who did, he's like, this goes out to George Floyd. Oomph, 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 oomph. And like, everyone was like, dude, shameless. Like even in our narcissistic culture, like that was a bridge too far. So if you see yourself go, if it has any kind of hint of that like vibe, just go post it, turn social media off for a week.
Yeah, check out digital detox yourself for a week if you are trying to appropriate the struggle of someone else and make yourself look good for it. Well, that's a good place to leave it. Dr. Dave, as always, I appreciate you. It's nice to. I hope our listeners, I hope our patients take something out of this. I hope they read the book. I think it's good. It's a little eye-rolly for the first half or so, but then it really, I like the examination of how we as a culture and some of us as parents are have an opportunity to contribute to either fixing this or making it worse. So
yeah, at the end of the day, a bad day of reading beats a good day on YouTube. So
there you go. There you go. Our next book club, I hope we're reading How to Be Well.
Yes. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. It's basically a journalistic takedown of the wellness industry. This is particularly germane to our female listeners, as this book is directly targeted to women.
Excellent. Can't wait to mansplain the hell out of it. So that's it for today. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the After Hours Clinic podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you love the show, leave us a review. You can sign up for our newsletter at joinbetterlife.com. And feel free to send in your hot takes and medical questions to podcast@joinbetterlife.com. Disclaimer, this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice or establish a doctor-patient relationship. Content should not replace professional medical consultation. Always consult your healthcare provider for medical conditions. Do not disregard or delay seeking professional advice based on podcast content.